ADHD Rewired, episode
317.
This is the podcast for those of us with really good intentions and a slightly wandering attention. I'm Eric Tivers. I'm a licensed clinical social worker by training and a coach by design. I'm your host, and I have ADHD. ADHD Rewired is more than just a podcast. We are a community. We are wired for connection, and you are not alone. Go to ADHDrewired.com to learn how you can join us in our free secret Facebook group. Get additional resources for every episode, including links to any resources we mention on today's show. You can support us on Patreon, sign up for our email newsletter, you can request podcast postcards to distribute to your clients and support groups, and you can learn all about our intensive online video-based coaching and accountability groups. You can do all of this at our website, ADHDrewired.com. We know that starting is the hardest part, so let's get started. Welcome back to another episode of ADHD Rewired. We are here. It is March 10th, 2020. It is here for our live Q&A. So if you're listening to this in April, welcome. You can join us today for our live Q&A. We already have a live question from Mary, and I think that Brendan was excited to pick it up. So welcome, Mary, and welcome, Brendan and Will. Hello, hello.
So, hi, Mary.
Yes. Yes.
Why you bugging?
I just always am bugging.
Run DMC reference. Come on, people.
I feel that one was I missed it. So.
You didn't hear? Mary, why you bugging? No?
I get it.
Will,
can you hear me?
Am I alone in this not getting it?
I know I was a hip hop kid in a rock and roll world in high school, but come on.
I thought it was funny.
So we're going to go karaoke right off the bat. It was great to hear Brendan sing.
Okay. So my biggest question is I need help with always being late.
All right.
Okay. How do you go about being late?
I just always have one more thing to do before I go out the door. And I always get myself ready last. I know all the things I should be doing, but I never do them.
Do you know how long it takes you to leave the house?
There's not like a regular schedule in my home, so that's part of the problem probably.
But specifically, have you ever time tracked the moment when you go, okay, we got to go, and actually like backing out of the driveway?
No. I can get ready really fast.
Okay. I would offer that it's probably a very consistent time.
Okay.
And Brendan, I like the way you pose the question. How do you go about being late?
Yeah. Because my biggest lesson around getting places on time came when we had the boys and they were like just big enough to move around the house on their own, but not old enough to do that in any way that was the least bit planned ahead and controlled. And I started to see just how long it took me to get out of the house. And I was like, oh, so if I have to leave the house at 3:00, I have to start leaving at like 2:30 because this is a half an hour process to get everything corralled and sent in the right direction. And do I have diapers and all that kind of stuff? So that was a massive learning spot for me. And then I started to see other areas where my tardiness came from. Things like I would go to a college campus because I was taking grad work at the time. And if I had to be in the building in class at 1:30, that meant I probably had to get to the parking lot by like 1:15 at the latest, if not 1:00, because I have to find a space. I have to walk from the space to the class and all that stuff. And I started to see all these holes that my time fell into that caused me to be late. Is any of this stuff ringing true for you?
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess, as we're talking through, maybe I should plan my day out the night before if I don't have a really predictable schedule so I can allow myself that time.
That is often very helpful.
That'll make it predictable.
And you also said something that I like to call it one more thing-itis, where it's that like sort of compulsion to just do one more thing.
That's me.
So recognize that your brain is lying to you. You don't actually have time for the one more thing. And like what I learned to do is I laugh at it because that still comes up like all the time for me. I'm like, I need to be home at this time. I just said, well, like, oh, no, I don't. I don't have the time to do that. So like on a regular basis, like I have the impulse to just do the one more thing. But because I've done this dance many times, I know what the reality is. And I know that my brain just likes to throw me curveballs. But I'm onto my brain now. So,
and look for patterns in your one more thing-itis too, right? Because it might be that it's not one more thing. It's always the same things. You just typically remember them in the moment of leaving the house or going to do the thing, right? Like a good example of this for me, which happens infrequently, is camping. We camp like fairly often, like every other month or once a month or something, but it's not so common that it's a habit yet. And right before we're ready to go, I'm all of a sudden going, do I have all the poles for my tent? Mm-hmm. I could check that yesterday. And I don't need to be doing it at the last minute, but that's when it pops into my brain. So that's why I created a checklist for camping, so I can kind of do the checklist in advance and then look at it and settle my anxiety that way instead of going back through the bag.
That makes sense.
Will, you got something?
Yeah. Couple things too. So like one of the things I find that makes me late or at least just behind schedule is I'll figure out like, okay, I got 5 minutes. I'll do this thing that, you know, like I'll figure out a way to spend the 5 minutes. I'll do a puzzle game on my phone, and then 15 minutes pass because it's one of those things where I don't realize time is passing while I'm doing it. And so there's also things like checking Twitter, or, you know, there's like little things that we don't really realize how much time's happening when they happen. And so watching out for okay, I cannot do these things because I lose track of time when I'm doing those things. And then also, one thing that Brendan clued me in on a while ago is I had this habit of just I'd go to my car and I'd get there and I'd be like, okay, I need this. And I'd go into my house and then I'd get the thing, come back to my car. I'm like, oh, I also need this. And so it's 3 or 4 trips to my car. That, you know, that adds up. So Brendan's like, yes, these are predictable things that you can do over and over again. Just make a checklist of the things you continuously forget, you know?
I realized for myself that when it's time for me to take my son to school, 7 minutes, it is so reliable from the time I say, okay, we got to get going, to actually pulling out of the driveway. 7 minutes. When it's a weekend outing, 12 minutes. Because now I'm thinking, okay, do I need to pack snacks? Do I need so those other things that I don't typically need that's out of the routine. And so it's if you just pay attention to how long it takes you. And also to me, that neither of those times makes sense to me, because it feels like it should be a minute. Okay, we need to go. Why isn't that just transport just happening and we're in the car now? You know, especially if, your little people are, also not right in the middle of the neurological bell curve. You need to add in time for their own distractions and shenanigans that they'll pull sometimes, because that's also predictable, right? If we're running late, that's on me. That's not my son's fault. Even though he's doing all other kinds of stuff that he shouldn't be doing, but that's predictable, right? I know he's not going to be completely compliant and follow directions the first time, every time. That would be nice, but that's not reality. So it's just kind of looking at, what is reality, and kind of work from there and give yourself more time than you need, and know what your sort of red flag thoughts are. Time for one more thing, or this will just take 5 minutes, or let me just change the load of laundry. All of those things are going to take longer than you think. And so be aware of what those things are, so you can have, those to be a cue for yourself to put on the brakes.
Including commuting time, right? Because we ADHD people can be pretty solid optimists on occasion. And I got to the library in 15 minutes once because I hit every light and there was no traffic. And that doesn't mean it takes 15 minutes to get to the library. That means once you hit every light and there was no traffic, that's probably a 20-minute drive, right?
In my presentation that I give on adulting, I have a slide where it sort of reveals in thirds. So the first one has a glass where it's half full, and it says, I'm an optimist, I'm half full. And then the next glass says, I'm a pessimist, I'm half empty. And then the third glass reveals, now keep in mind the liquid is yellow, it says, I'm urine. And then so I say, no, it's in your glass. Like, be aware of what's in the glass, right? Like, don't be an optimist. Don't be a pessimist. Learn. Like, and what we do in our coaching groups is it's not just about tracking time. I think there's a critically important component to this. It's make the predictions and then track time, because that's going to tell you how off you tend to be. And then you can learn to actually plan more accurately, knowing, all right, so when my gut tells me, when every like fiber in my being says this is a 15-minute task, I know that's a 45-minute task, right? Because I've learned that that's about how much I tend to underestimate how long those things will take.
And there's also the part where we conflate emotion and time too, right? And how that can mess us up. Like for me, if I've got a task that I've been putting off for a while, the length of time that task feels like it's going to take expands because I feel guilty and shameful about the fact that I haven't done it. So now it feels like it's going to take longer. But if I'm excited about a task, it takes less time and I'm wrong in the other opposite direction. All
right, let's go to, I think it's Karen's question. Karen says, I have a 14-year-old daughter who's got ADHD and attentive type. She's slow in all aspects of life, self-care, completing things, and schoolwork. This is very crippling for her since she started high school, has a 504, gets time extensions, spends all her time trying to complete assignments, no balance in life. We are all stressed. Any advice? So when I was a kid, one of my mother's favorite refrains to me was, "You're as slow as molasses." So I get the slow thing. And that didn't feel real good. So, looking at what are just on that particular issue, the processing, what are things that we can do to help with that? And, part of it's going to be exercise, sleep. So some of those kind of more like, what are the organic roots or reasons why some of this slowness occurs? Also, she's 14, which means that her, like biologically, she wants to be waking up at around noon, and schools don't care about that. So it really is a huge, huge problem for all teenagers. So because biologically, a teenage circadian rhythm is not what the rest of the world's circadian rhythm is. So as far as the balance, I don't know, what do you got on that? And let's spend just a little bit of time on this question, since this is an ADHD essentials kind of question.
Really is.
Yeah.
Make things easier as much as possible. Like for self-care, she should have a toothbrush and a hairbrush and all those kinds of essential bodily cleaning tools in every bathroom in your house. So it doesn't matter where she is. And so that you can be near whenever she's doing stuff. Like if she's slow in the morning because she does her stuff upstairs, but you're downstairs getting breakfast ready, you might find that her getting ready in the morning in the downstairs bathroom is better because you're on the same level as her and she feels more accountable. That's one thing. You can use music to set a pace, right? You can have a playlist for taking a shower or something like that that's going to time her. Like when this song plays, you should be washing your hair. And if you're not, start. Work with the guidance counselor and school staff around what that 504 is saying. And is it valid? Do we need to change some stuff? Do we need to tweak things? How can we make her assignments smaller so that she doesn't have to spend as much time working on them? And then also, just get a B. Like you don't have to get an A in everything. Just accept that you're going to get a B and don't work so hard so that you can instead go to sleep, have some friends, do that kind of stuff. That's allowed.
Will, is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, it's just trying to be neurotypical is exhausting.
Yes.
So you don't always need to try and be neurotypical. That's exactly what Brenan was saying. Get the B. Like choose what level you want to be. Because, really, there's not that much of a difference.
And I think this is something that we could apply to adults too, is that, so many of us were brought up on this message is always do your best. That is actually not wise or efficient. And when we think about it in the terms of sort of behavioral economics, like why would we want to give our all to everything? Like that's not a great way to invest our time, right? Like give our all to the things that matter most and go for good enough, for most other things. So like if, just because your kid's capable of an A, right? But maybe that A requires 5 hours of work, where for everyone else, it's like half an hour of work. It's not worth it. It really isn't, right? So if your kid knows that they can pull a B with, 15 minutes or an A for 3 hours, the smart choice is actually the B, right? So, cause it's just not worth the stress. And we can apply this to work, situations too. Like I think we come into a lot of areas around perfectionism. And I think that, perfectionism is often born in schools. I know for me, when I was diagnosed, after, always struggling through school, and then I started taking Adderall, and it's like, whoa, I can get good grades. And then I was like, whoa, hello, anxiety. You don't go away. Cause I was like, I could do well. And now I felt like I had to do well on everything. And so it's taken a lot of unlearning around that as well. So we want to be really mindful about being sort of wise about where effort is being, put in, and actually help kids, and for ourselves adults, to think about like how much does this actually matter, right? Looking at things like, look at the grade rubric, and if kids got a decent grade and it comes finals time, like they probably don't need to spend that much time studying if they're already getting a really good grade. If they're in the middle of a grade, let's say they have a solid 87 and they would need to get like 105% on their final exam to actually pull an A. And you can get as low as like a 30% to stay at a B, I would suggest skip studying for that class and do something else that would actually matter. So really think about this in a more pragmatic way, and then also talk to teachers about workload. If they can modify the workload, or for long-term assignments, have more frequent check-ins. And this is also true for us adults. If you have a boss that gives you a big assignment, request more frequent check-ins, and request that a boss never ever gives you the due date of whenever you get around to it, because that is the kiss of death when you have ADHD.
Right. And also redefine your best, right? Like, because Eric, you have a little bit of a different perspective on it than I do. Because for me, I'm like, today my best is this, and it might not be what my amazing is. Like what most people define as their best, I define as my amazing, right? Because there are days when I'm the greatest person to walk on the face of the planet. And there's days when I don't know why they let me out of my house. And so I need to know which of those days I'm having, because if it's a day when I don't know why they let me out of my house, my best might be I sent 3 emails and slept, right? But when I'm amazing, I did 4 workshops that day and I sent 107 emails and I called 14 people and I was amazing dad to my kid and amazing husband to my wife, and yay. Depends on where I am.
I want to see proof that you've had a day that you did all those things.
Tuesday, I ran 2 workshops, and I sent at least 3 emails, and I was an amazing dad to my kids, and I was an amazing husband to my wife. I didn't see my friends in Chelmsford who were upset with me because one of the workshops was in Chelmsford, which is the town I grew up in. So there's that. But it was a pretty solid day. Wow.
I felt exhausted just hearing all of those things.
You know what helped was at the start of my second workshop in Chelmsford, a woman said to me that she had come to one of my library talks in my old hometown, and that I had fundamentally changed her relationship with her parents.
Wow.
Because of that workshop, and fundamentally changed her parents' relationship with their grandson, her kid. And like everything was so much smoother in their family because now the grandparents knew that it was a brain thing, not a misbehaving bad kid.
Beautiful.
So that was pretty awesome.
Beautiful. All right, let's go to Gail's question. Gail asks, and didn't say if she wants to go live or not. How do I know if my challenges are ADHD or if I might have some OCD stuff? Would the treatment or tools be different for OCD than ADHD? So, Joe, let me know if you're willing to go live so we can kind of dig in a little bit. But OCD and ADHD, not that uncommon that it can go together. I have questions whether I have maybe a slightly just subclinical OCD, because OCD is not just like hand washing and checking the door locks and those kinds of things. A lot of it has to do with an exhausting mental like process of doing one more thing. Like, and, you know, I think part of ADHD is the one more thing-itis. But, so I think it's similar to like ADHD. When someone doesn't know anything about ADHD, they might think it's just the hyperactive boy. Right. But we know that ADHD is a way more than that. And you don't have to have hyperactivity to have ADHD. OCD is similar in that regards, in that there is a lot of components to OCD that are not, you know, your sort of very stereotypical kind of OCD. So I think it's really looking at what are the things that sort of come up, how much of it is executive function impairment. Because I actually, it's my own theory that I think that in OCD there actually is also a lot of executive function impairment. It just looks different and presents different and sort of comes out in a different way. Because if we think about Dr. Barkley's sort of like bottom line of what is executive functioning, it's any goal-oriented behavior that is sort of sent out into the world and has some kind of feedback loop that comes back towards ourself, right? So if it's like, oh, I need to make a phone call, and that's as far as it goes as a thought. Right? That is executive function, because we're not actually taking the action that we need to do in order to do the thing. Right? With OCD, if you are avoiding things in a way that's going to interfere with the pursuit of a goal, or you are spending a lot more time than is necessary on things, you know, while that could be ADHD, it is also possible that, you know, you really have to look at it through the lens of, are you spending more time on it because you're stuck in the weeds, or are you spending more time of it because you're trying to alleviate some kind of anxiety, and there's a sort of obsessive a behavioral focus on it with a compulsive sort of approach to like not letting it go and continuing to work on it. And so really looking at it from the lens of OCD is sort of that anxiety sort of spectrum disorders, where ADHD is more of that behavioral executive functioning challenge. The differences between those as far as treatment tools go, with OCD, it can be very there's a very kind of manualized treatment for OCD. As part of acceptance and commitment therapy called exposure and response prevention. So if you've ever seen Fear Factor, it's kind of like therapeutic Fear Factor, where it's like, I mean, it really, it in a very systematic way, it makes you, sort of sit with and lean in towards the thing that is making you feel anxious, to intentionally increase anxiety and try to sit with that until your nervous system just goes, okay, I give up, and then stop sending you all the signals of anxiety. And so what that is really doing, it really is rewiring the brain. So you're exposing yourself to the things that increase the anxiety, and then you're changing how you respond to that. Because what happens is you have a triggering situation that increases the anxiety. Then you would do something to alleviate it. So your brain goes, I'm so glad I'm helping you out by letting you know that this is a real danger and you should do all these things to avoid this thing that's making you feel anxious. And now that you avoided this thing that made you feel anxious, don't you feel better? I'll be there next time this comes up for you. Right. So that's sort of what's happening. But what's happening is that we are constantly in OCD being reinforced in a way that is not helpful. Right. So it's like, it's helpful, but it's not. So we have to sort of change that feedback loop. And while your brain's trying to help you out to alleviate the anxiety, you have to sort of override that sort of primal instinct to avoid, whatever is creating the anxiety, face it directly, and it's going to change that feedback loop. So over time, that triggering event, that triggering situation is not going to kind of hijack your brain and send you all those signals around anxiety. That's sort of falsely saying, warning, 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 this is dangerous. It's a good acronym I like. It's false evidence appearing real. So it's like, it's this is awful. This is going to be fill in the blank for worst case scenario. But then you want to ask yourself, is it though? Is it really worst case scenario? Is that thing really possibly going to happen? Brenan, it looks like you had a thought you wanted to jump in there with. Oh, and Gail can go live, so we can bring Gail up while Brendan is.
We went in a lot of different directions with that, or you went really. Let me
really. I just typically go a linear path and go from
I was
point
like,
A
right
to,
there. That's a good thing I can piggyback on. Nope, we're past it. Kept going.
There goes that train.
One area that I think ADHD and OCD can kind of hang out together in is because of the executive functions that ADHD people have. Other people's average can feel like our perfect. So we can feel like we have to like have all our T's crossed and I's dots and boxes checked if we want to just perform at the same level that everyone else seems to be performing at relatively consistently. And that can come out in significant perfectionism. It can come out in like this intense desire to be focused on the details that we may or may not succeed on. Which doesn't necessarily mean you have OCD. It could just be that you've been burned by ADHD enough that you're like, I have to make sure.
The other thing that I actually didn't even bring up is obsessive compulsive personality disorder, which is, I don't remember
I was just learning about this one.
I don't remember who I first heard this sort of differentiation from, but like was with OCD, it's like someone with OCD might be considered like completely anal retentive. But like they rationalize why this is what they need to do. With someone with OCPD, they know they're completely anal retentive, but they're okay with it and they do it to sort of like say, this is what I need to do to manage my life. And so in some ways, I think like good, and I'm saying this sort of loosely, good ADHD management requires a little bit of a obsessive compulsive personality disorder. Like, yes, I am going to look at my calendar 30 times in a day, because I know I need to do that. Like, I know I'm going to have my to-do list presented in a very specific kind of way because I know that is helpful. So from the outside, that might look slightly neurotic and maybe a little exhausting. And maybe it is, but it's helpful. And so there's a more of a knowing from the around obsessive compulsive personality disorder, which is different from actually obsessive compulsive disorder.
There's also how much of your obsessive compulsive stuff is affecting others and how much is it not affecting others, right? I can check my calendar 1,000 times a day. Nobody cares. It's not affecting anybody. I can have the most complicated or simplistic to-do list on the face of the planet. Nobody cares unless they have to use it. And if I insist that someone else uses my to-do list when they do something in my house or whatever, now we're starting to hit disorder land, right? But before that, it doesn't matter as long as I'm not trying to instill my personal rules on someone else.
Gail, so if you're comfortable, share with us just a little bit about like the specifics of what like you're kind of wondering about.
Right. I ruminate about certain things, and it's hard for me to step away and stop doing the whatever. Let's say I'm finishing a work project on a computer, which is like a CAD drawing, and I'm looking at it and like, did I get everything? And maybe I didn't. And maybe this line isn't exactly lined up right. And this font isn't the exact same size as that font. Things that no one else cares about or looks at that I can't seem to stop myself from. You know,
Gail, when you said that like to me, there's a very knowing, like, sort of nuance there. It's I know that I'm doing the things that nobody else really thinks about or cares about. Like, that's when I know I am in like obsessive land. So I'm wondering, Will, I saw you shaking your head. I'm wondering if people who are here in the Zoom room, they just hit that raise hand button. If you just relate to that. Yes, we see a lot of hands going up. So what happens when you try to pull yourself away?
It's like I'm stuck. Even if like this relates to the on time business, I know that my alarms are going off because it's time for me to leave. And I still, it's like another spirit has taken over, a bad spirit. That's one spot. Another spot is getting ready and leaving the house. Almost inevitably, I'm like checking all of my pockets. Do I have everything? And what if I forgot this? Or there's something I'm looking for, and I'm like looking through a drawer or looking on a dining room table. And all of a sudden, I don't even remember what I was looking for, but I still feel this compulsion to be looking. like, what's here that I forgot all about?
Gail, when you're going to through the house to look for something, have you ever tried singing the song that is just made up lyrics about what you're looking for?
Yes. I think, yes, that is familiar.
I do that pretty regularly because it's a way to just sort of like keep my brain focused on what the heck it is that I'm actually doing.
Right. I mean, I'll have a list. Like, I just went away this past weekend. I made a list of, what I need to pack. So I think I have them all together. I think I finally am ready to actually put everything together and leave. Then all of a sudden I'm rethinking, well, maybe I need this thing. Maybe I need that journal. Maybe I need to add my work with me. Maybe I should bring my laptop. And I'm like, I don't know if that's ADHD or that's some weird perfectionism or that's part of ADHD.
Gail, one of the things I wonder if might be helpful for you, if you have like a friend who you feel comfortable being like 1,000% vulnerable with, and they can come over to your home and help you just go through the behavioral routine of leaving your home. Like where you're not actually needing to go anywhere, but you're like, have it where you're kind of getting a little bit engaged in your work. Then the alarm goes off where it's time to go. And now you're just literally practicing leaving the way you need to leave. And so if you're doing it in the realm of practice, because right now, probably your brain has no idea what it actually looks like or feels like leaving in a focused way where you don't get sucked into other stuff. So it might be helpful to show your brain what that looks like. And it may be easier to do when you're doing it in practice.
I like it. I know that in the past, I've asked people to help me leave. Like, don't go yet. Like, I have a part-timer. Let's say she has to leave at a certain time. And I'm like, don't leave without me because I need to get out of the house.
I've so used employees like that before.
Oftentimes she can't stay because she has kids or whatever. And that it's like, oh shit, it's all over. They couldn't stay to help get me out of the house. It's all over.
It's all over.
I'm in trouble.
Well, what if you were to actually, when they're leaving, say, okay, I'm going to call you now. Like, keep me on the phone until I leave. Yeah,
I do think it would be helpful for sure to have someone either walk me through it over the phone or be here. That'd be much better. Yeah.
Brendan's jumping at an idea.
I like every time I hear this idea, the notion of like, I just can't seem to go wherever I'm going, whether it's going to work or going home or the leaving part.
Right.
I always wonder about where in your value structure. I'm big on values right now. That's kind of where my head is for a lot of stuff. So a lot of stuff's getting framed that way. I apologize in advance. But I start to wonder about when it comes to your values, how can you leverage whatever your values are such that going to the next step is consistent with those values, even if you have to do it intentionally, right? So, and sometimes values are in conflict. You might be at work because you highly value being productive or making a difference or whatever your work is, right? But probably you also value family or friends or whatever is going next. And you're stuck in one value. You're stuck in the I am productive value, or I am making a difference value, or whatever, or I have a clean desk value. I don't know. And you're not shifting to that next value of I value having time with my friends at the 99, or I value spending the evening with my wife or my kids or whatever. So I'm wondering if that's would be a useful approach to take on this, where you kind of lay out your day in terms of what's going on, and somewhere on that calendar you're putting which value is wrapped up in whatever that activity is, and might that help you go on to the next one? Because if you're just going home to go home, okay, I guess I don't feel like going home because I'm getting a lot of meaning out of sending these emails and replying to people and being productive and da-da-da-da-da. But if I'm going home to rest and I value rest and recuperating, now the reason I go home matters. I'm not just going home and going away from my first value. I'm going towards my second value.
Yes. That sounds like very helpful. Yeah.
So how could you then execute that? How could you integrate that into a strategy you might be able to use?
Somehow to remind myself to do that, a rubber band on the wrist or something. I don't know. Like get out of that weird neurotic head and into what are my values? Where am I? What's this all about anyway? To have to be mindful, take that additional, get get rid of the clutter thoughts running through my mind and be focused in the here and now, right? What's my goal here? This is where I'm at now. I'm not in this clutter pile looking for something and I don't even know why I'm looking for it. I am on to going out the door.
I wonder if the cue that you use could be literally as specific as it is time to step out of productivity value and move into friend value.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of just like time to stop working, go to place.
Right.
Yeah. You can even color code your calendar based on values.
Cool.
Will, what do you got? Look like you had an idea here.
Yeah, I discovered the trouble with activating to like leave places when my wife and I switched picking up the kids and dropping them off. So like she'd leave in the morning and then I'd be like, time to go to work. And then sometime in the next 45 minutes, I'd get out the door, which I was just like, I don't understand. I used to take the kids to school and be able to just leave. And it has a lot to do, for me, it had a lot to do with like making sure that I'm prepared to leave when I need to leave so that I don't hit that like, oh, I need to get all my stuff together now. If my bag is packed and I have my lunch ready, then I can activate and do those things because it's a smaller step rather than being like, there's this big project I have to activate for and do all these steps. I'm going to get lost somewhere in there and start doing something I don't need to be doing.
All right. Speaking of things that we do need to be doing, we need to take a break. So let's do that, and we will be right back. Our spring coaching and accountability groups just started. Did you want to join? Don't wait until the last minute. Go to coachingrewired.com and click on the big blue button to be added to our summer coaching group interest list. Our summer coaching and accountability groups starts July 13th and runs for 10 weeks. Join our intense online coaching groups, which are designed for you and all the struggles that having ADHD can bring to your life and relationships. Go to coachingrewired.com and click the big blue button and to be added to our summer group interest list. We will send you an invitation. Registration is by invitation only. Once you add your name, sometime in May, you will get a save the date email. Don't wait. Our coaching groups fill up each season. So go get your name on the list now. Go to coachingrewired.com. That's coachingrewired.com. Support for this podcast comes from patrons. I appreciate all the patrons who help make this podcast possible with their contributions. I want to thank Nathaniel C., Audrey H., and Tess B. for your monthly donations. Audrey, thanks for increasing your monthly donation to $25. You and Tess can join me on the monthly coaching call. We are all in a difficult situation right now during this COVID-19 crisis, and I appreciate all of you who are listening and who are still able to financially support this podcast. If you can't give financially, consider leaving me a rating and review on your podcast provider or share a podcast episode to your favorite social group. All of your support, whatever you can give, is appreciated. For those of you who can give $25 a month, then you can join us for our monthly coaching call. Our next group coaching call will be on Tuesday, April 28th at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. Consider becoming a patron at the $25 a month level if you can. To become a patron, go to ADHDrewired.com/Patreon. Patreon is Patreon. That's ADHDrewired.com/Patreon. And thanks. We are back. We have Ella here who has a question about open loops and unfinished projects. Do you want to go ahead and ask your question, Ella?
Well, my house, my life are full of things that are half finished and things I really all want to do. It's not that I don't want to do the thing. It's just that at the time there might be to do it, I want to do something else. Or I run into a snag. Like yesterday, I started fixing the toilet and then there was something never mind what the snag was. But later on, I came into the bathroom and there was the tank open, and you know how this is.
I do. It's the perpetual rabbit holes.
Oh, okay. I just think it's like that I'm slothful and.
No, it's really what it is. Like it's I don't want to say it's a lack of mindfulness, but part of it is it's like pinballing from like, oh, I have to go like get this thing so I can fix this other thing. But on your way to go get the thing, you see another thing that needs your attention, and now you're on that. And so you get into that thing, which requires you to go get something else in another part of your house. And now you see in another part of your house that, oh, this thing needed my attention. And then in between your way back from that thing to the other thing, you saw the other unfinished project that you did. Like, oh man, I should have finished that. I forgot about that. And then you just kind of look at it and be like, man, there are unfinished things everywhere. Is that kind of how it works?
Yes. And the other thing is that the thing I went to get that belongs somewhere else is now, in other words, like the gardening tools are now in the office. The bills are in the kitchen,
Okay.
So it's compounding it.
So I have a couple sort of specific ideas, sort of for like the in the moment stuff. And then others ideas are around sort of mindset around these things. Okay. So, one idea. So if your project is like in a specific room in your home or a specific area, and you need to, go to another area of your home to get something for it, you can either use a transition object, meaning like you are taking something with you that you're not allowed to put down until you come back. So for example, like if you're doing laundry and you're tired of having to rewash your clothes for the fourth time because you keep forgetting about it, you can take the laundry detergent with you. If you want to get really hardcore, you can even like tie a string to it and wrap it around your wrist. So it's like literally chained to you. You could also sort of use that idea of like a big ball of yarn where you literally are like holding onto the yarn, or where you tie it to something say you tie the yarn to your toilet and you have to go to your garage. Well, you unravel that big yarn or get like a kite string, right? And so you're literally like leaving a direct physical trail for yourself to come back to your original point. You could also use the strategy of singing a song that repeats the same line that reminds you that what you're going to go get and where you're going back to. Okay. The other thing is making a list of all your unfinished projects and making a commitment to not starting new projects until you've started tackling the ones that are those open loops. We talk a lot in my groups about open loops, and, as someone who is very well acquainted with anxiety and panic attacks due to overwhelm and having way too much to do, I have found that closing loops is one of the best ways to decrease that sort of overwhelm anxiety from having too much to do. I remember being younger, and I would go through this where like I got into that, like, all right, today's the day I am going to completely organize my closet. So I began emptying the entire closet and all of its contents onto the bedroom floor. And then I'm about halfway through, and what do you know? I don't want to do this anymore.
Yes.
Right. And you're just looking around you, and you're just like, you just wish you had like a wand to make it all go away. Right. So one of the things that I have tried to do in those kinds of scenarios is shrink the scope. Right. Okay. I can organize the closet by just taking stuff off one shelf and organize that. I don't have to take all contents out, because if you look at your history, for me, I look at my history and say, I'll take all items out of the closet, and I am not going to want to finish this. And then I'm going to be like in the fetal position, in tears, in my room, saying, why did I start this? And someone help me, please. Did I just share too much information?
That would certainly be accurate, like the entire office papers on the floor because we're in the process of cleaning them out.
Right. So instead of taking all the office papers, take like an inch worth and focus on that inch. Right. And so it's because in part of our mind, it makes sense to like take it all out, except that it doesn't, because we are just digging ourselves a hole too deep that feels too hard to get ourselves out of. Mm-hmm. Will, do you want to add something to this one?
Yeah. I find a lot of these things also happen when I don't like define what my end point looks like. And like, I'll be like, do stuff. And then I'm like, oh, but I could also do this and I could do this. So, and circling back to our other thing about always doing your best, maybe you define what your project would look like at like a B or an A. And if you have the energy for an A, that's great. But if you only have the energy for a B, well, that's okay too. That's getting more done than so like kind of giving yourself a couple different endpoints to shoot for would be a good way to go about things to make sure that you're completing tasks.
The I don't remember whose sort of concept this is, but the idea of looking at yourself between the ideas of being an optimizer versus a satisficer. And I find that people with ADHD who tend to get into this sort of perfectionistic sort of role, tend to be optimizers. So they're not only are they like fixing the toilet, they are going to level the grout and they are going to change the piping in there just because they know how to do it. And since you've pulled the toilet up, you might as well get in there. So that's being the maximizer, where the satisficer goes, all right, what's my project goal? All right, what is going to satisfy the outcome that I am actually looking for, versus like the optimizers or the maximizers are the people who subscribe to Consumer Reports magazine and will do tons of research before buying that $9.99 item, where I want to just like encourage people to ask themselves, how much is your time worth? And is your time worth just getting the first thing that comes up on your Amazon list? And if it's not good, then you can just replace it, versus if the alternative is spending 3 to 4 hours trying to find out which is the perfect item at the $10 price point. Like, so it's like really looking at what's really important, what is really my scope. And I think a big part of that is also being not just clear about what you are doing, also be clear about what you're not doing. Is that helpful for you?
What did you mean be clear about what I'm not doing?
Okay. So, and I do this for myself a lot when I'm doing stuff online, because as we know, the internet is endless and there's always one more link to click and always one more page to read. Right. So if let's say I have a research question and let's say I want to say, whose idea is satisficer versus optimizer? So I'm starting to Google that, right? I might do write a little sticky note and I'll put it on my computer, is looking for this question, not looking for anything else. Right. So if I'm like, ooh, I'm on the article and then there's another link to something there, I'm like, ooh, that's interesting. Like that helps me go, nope, stop. That's not what I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
Right. So I think the power of the pause is, just pause and breathe before you go and do that next thing. Go, is this really what I want to be doing right now? Okay. Anything else to add?
Piggybacking on the initial toilet half fixed, right? Another thing you can do is you're allowed to have things in more than one place, right? Like you can have more than one wrench or something. If you find that you often end up leaving bathroom tasks, projects half finished because you don't have the thing that you need because it lives in the toolbox in the basement, just get another one and leave it in the bathroom. If there's a tool you often need in that space, have it in that space. So there's fewer reasons to get distracted and wind up going off and doing something else. And another thing that my clients have found some success with is strategically using music. Like maybe you have enough motivation to get everything out of the closet, but you don't have enough motivation to get everything put back in the closet, like Eric was saying. That's where strategic music use can come in. You get everything out, and then when you start to feel yourself slagging, that's when you turn on the eye of the tiger. And now all of a sudden you can finish that closet cleaning.
That song played so much in my house when whether it's to get myself motivated or my son, and it works because it's that song is like, it's impossible for that to not like pump you up to activation. All right. Well, thank you for the question. That was, I think that is one that so many of us relate to. All right. Let's get another question here. Allison, let's see. Even when I build an extra time to allow myself to be on time, I seem to always still be late. Even if I get up earlier, like eating cereal takes longer. All the stuff I do in the morning fills the time that I have. Suggestions. And this is sort of similar to a question we answered earlier. One thing I just would add to that, this is something we should do in our coaching groups, is we help people identify their checkpoints. So what is that very specific time in, say, your morning routine that if you're not doing this thing by this time, you're going to need to cut something else out. Otherwise, you are going to be late. Like, I know myself, like, so, on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, I go, one place to the gym. And I know if I have not gotten in the shower by 10:30, that means I cannot shave that morning. Cause if I spend the extra few minutes to shave, I know I am going to be late. So really looking at when is the last point of time that you could do something in order to be where you need to be. And you really want to think as worst case scenario. Like, imagine that everything that could go wrong will go wrong. And that's how you want to plan your time, because like you can plan that those things going wrong. And if you're wrong, it didn't go wrong. You got a few extra minutes on your hands, and that is okay.
If you have an Alexa, set it in Alexa. That's my morning. When there's 10 minutes before the boys have to go to the bus, I hear, this is your reminder, get ready to leave. And if I am not making their peanut butter and jelly sandwiches by the time that goes off, I'm in a world of hurt. So I need to scramble and start making sandwiches. I only have 5 minutes before they have to get out the door.
All right. Let's do this. We're going to take one more really quick break, and then we will come back. And I think Will wanted to answer Blake's question. It has to do with being burnt out.
Yeah, Blake did somehow get kicked out of the thing.
Oh, Blake. We'll try to figure that out, and he may or may not be our next question. We'll take a quick break for Blake, and we'll be right back. Will Curb on his next episode of Hacking Your ADHD, as his topic is the best laid plans and COVID-19. Check out Hacking Your ADHD with Will Curb this week and every Monday. This should already be in your podcast feed. Join Will as he explores ways that you can work with your ADHD brain to do more of the things that you want to do. Subscribe to these short, mindful ways to hack your ADHD. Go to hackingYourADHD.com for show notes and to easily subscribe. And every Friday, check out ADHD Essentials with Brenan Mahan. Brenan's guests are parents, educators, and experts focused on children with ADHD. Go to ADHDessentials.com to learn more. Both Hacking Your ADHD and ADHD Essentials are both part of the ADHD Rewired podcast network, available to everyone, everywhere you consume podcasts. Join me and the host of ADHD Essentials, Brenan Mahan, and the host of Hacking Your ADHD, Will Curb, every second Tuesday of the month at 10:30 a.m. Pacific, 1:30 p.m. Eastern, for an hour of live Q&A. If you are listening to this podcast the day it came out, you will have time to join us. Register for free at ADHDrewired.com. That's ADHDrewired.com/events, or just click the events tab at the top of the page. Our next live Q&A is Tuesday, April 14th at 1:30 p.m. Eastern. We hope to see you there. All right, we are back, and Blake, who somehow got kicked out of the room and can't make his way back in, you hear that sound? That's him knocking on the door, but no one's there to let him in. Blake's question was, what could I do during my workday to understand what pace I'm working at? I feel burnt out almost every day, but I don't know how to tell if I'm currently doing something to contribute to it. Will, you just had an episode recently on burnout.
Yes. And it's a lot of mindfulness, is because you often don't know you're hitting burnout till you're already there, which sucks. I've been noticing it a lot more by the end of my days, where I extend a little too long. I'm like, I just want to finish these things up. So a big piece is just taking those breaks throughout the day, even when you don't think you need a break. Because when you need the break, it's too late to like really get anything out of it. So scheduling breaks ahead of time to be like, okay, I'm going to take a break at this time so that I don't just crash at the end of the day or I'm not crashing into a break where it's not really going to help. And I'm going to try and get back in and just be blah for the rest of the day. Cause I hate going home and being like, kids want to do something and I just want to stare at the ceiling. Like, no fun for anyone involved.
I love staring at the ceiling or wall. Any just like plain boring object will do. The stare. Okay. So, well, what do you do? Like, how have you identified for yourself, like what, how to like sort of prevent that realizing you're burnt out before it's too late?
Yeah. So doing check-ins with myself, and also just big things are like making sure that I'm staying on top of any self-care things I have throughout the day, drinking water, doing, as I say at the breaks, like go for a walk or something, making sure I am not completely isolating myself and not talking to anyone, like even if it's just like checking in with my accountability group and being like, how's it going, guys? Because I'll be like, okay, I'm going to work on this. I'm going to set my phone to do not disturb and then let myself fall into hyperfocus, and that it just, the hyperfocus drains too much of my executive function. And then I just hit that burnout at the end of the day. So trying to do the things that are keep me out of going into hyperfocus or just not taking breaks.
So it sounds like it first begins with self-awareness of first identify what are those tendencies of how you sort of engage with what you're doing that lead towards that. And so there's a real opportunity and a challenge there as well, because that also requires some tracking, which, as we know with ADHD, is inherently challenging. But it is also it can be so valuable. So working with someone to maybe have someone to check in with you around your tracking. I used to, before I went completely into the world of just online coaching for adults with ADHD, I used to work with, kids and adults, who were on high functioning on the autism spectrum, kind of Asperger's syndrome. And there was always this, sort of challenge of they were the last ones to realize how burnt out, overwhelmed, and stressed they were. Right. And so it really, because their bodies were not good indicators of, oh, I need to take a break. They realized that when they were basically like in meltdown, right? Or just completely shutting down. And so it was looking at sort of tracking about, all right, how long can I last at this thing before I felt that way? And then sort of backtracking and say, all right, where's my buffer space? Like so it could be to, let's say that working for 2 hours straight will just put you into that space. All right, set a timer for an hour and a half then. That says, all right, I need to take a break at that point. Or if you're even looking at it on a more long-term basis, that was, oh, I haven't taken a vacation in 2 years and I want to gouge my eyes out and bang my head against the wall because I'm so burnt out. Looking at, all right, what is the interval between like vacations that, so you can get to that point? Cause if you're at the point where you haven't planned a vacation and you desperately need a vacation, one, you'll be paying the ADHD tax because now you're going to be having to spend more money if you're traveling somewhere. But it's one of the things we want to look at and say, okay, is there a time of year where I tend to feel this way? So whether it's the tracking the day-to-day stuff and identifying one of those times of day and based on what activities, do you tend to need those breaks, or if it's more long-term, needing those breaks, tracking about what is that time interval for you that, where you kind of require that a little bit. Brendan, am I understanding that is the smile that you give when I'm bouncing all over the place?
No, I just thought what you're saying was good. That's all. There was no criticism.
It was a similar smile to the other question I answered earlier. I'm like, is something happening in the chat? But I want to stay focused on it.
Good stuff coming out of your face. That's all. One thing I like when it comes to breaks is I like to plan mine. Like, what are you going to do during your break? It's one thing to say I'm going to take a break, but if all you do is decide you're going to take a break, then email becomes Facebook, and that's pretty much the same thing, right? So what do you mean by taking a break? Are you going to go get a drink? Are you going to go for a walk? Are you going to play with your dog? Are you going to call a friend? What does it look like?
I have a curious question here that I'm going to ask the participants to raise their hands. So actually, I'm going to lower all hands here. I want to know from the participants, and we have 31 people who are here. Does anyone find taking a break on Facebook to actually recharge you? Brendan, you're really oppositional right now.
I'm not being oppositional. It
Really?
depends on how I do it. But
there were two hands just in the community. Okay.
my Facebook, it depends on my level of busy. But one of the things I do on Facebook is I post like today's awesome, and I try to make my Facebook fairly positive. And as a result of that, I get feedback from my friends and stuff about that. It's like good, happy, positive feedback stuff. And that is recharging. And also I'm a super extrovert. So like that social connection is often what I need when I'm burning out.
Okay. And first of all, I have to say that your today's awesome. Like, I can't believe how consistent you are on your today's. Like,
I used to be way more even than I am now.
It's pretty impressive. But you have an intention behind there. And I think there's a difference between going there with a specific intention versus just like seeing what dopamine is on tap for today.
Right.
All right. So while we might enjoy numbing out on Facebook, like maybe not the best break, especially if our tendency is, I'll go 5 minutes on Facebook and then it's an hour later. If that's the track record, stop going on Facebook for your breaks. Stop playing video games for your breaks. If you are like me and we'll go 5 minutes, 10 minutes on this game and then it's an hour later. Like, I wish that I could do 10 minutes and then shift back. My brain has other plans. So I just have to be honest with myself. And so like, yeah, cause burnout it's sort of this getting stuck in a gear, like whatever gear that is, it's getting stuck in that gear. And so we have to give ourselves time to sort of shift down, from where we're at. Cause I think that's where burnout can really prevail.
Yeah. And I also see it, another thing we talked about earlier, trying to keep up, trying to be neurotypical is exhausting and it's going to lead you to burnout because you're like, you know, my neurotypical friend is doing this, and this. I need to do all those things too. And it's like, no, you don't. Do what's important for you to do, not what's important for someone else to do.
While there are more questions in the Q&A, we are also running a little long on time here. So I want to thank everyone for asking questions. If you like these podcasts and you want to know what other questions I might be answering after we hit record, you can check out our Patreon page because I'm going to stick around and answer just a couple more questions. And we will get those posted to our patrons who support us at the $5 a month level. So thank you if you are a supporter, and thank you in advance if you are going to become a supporter. Just go to ADHDrewired.com/Patreon, which is Patreon. Brenan Mahan from ADHD Essentials. Check out his podcast and his coaching groups. Thank you. You can go to ADHDessentials.com to learn more. And William Kerr from Hacking Your ADHD. You can check out his podcast as well, or go to hackingYourADHD.com. I think he has a mailing list. Will, do you have a mailing list?
I have a place where I collect emails for a mailing list that I have not started yet.
So he has an ADHD good intention mailing list. So sign up for it because at some point he will be announcing awesome online classes. We are in the development phase of that. And you guys know that on this podcast, I have a history of when I announce something, that is how I create accountability. And now we just lit the fire even higher, Will, because it's out there.
Yeah.
And look what happened when Will talked about starting a podcast on this podcast. He started a podcast. So it may take us a little longer than we want to get started, but it will happen. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and we'll catch you next month. We do this every second Tuesday of the month. Thanks, everyone. This is Eric Tivers. Thank you for listening, and congratulations for making it to the end. ADHD Rewired is more than just a podcast. We are a community focused on learning, growing, and connection. The website is ADHDrewired.com. You can find summaries and additional resources for each episode. You can apply to our free and secret Facebook community. You can learn more about ADHD Rewired's intensive online video-based coaching and accountability groups, and sign up for my email newsletter to get exclusive content you won't get anywhere else. It's all at ADHDrewired.com. While you're there, click the Patreon button. If you're a regular listener and you're still listening to my voice, consider making a monthly contribution by becoming a patron through our Patreon page. If you are able to financially support my work, it would mean a lot. This show is free to listeners, but it is not free to produce. And patrons get really cool perks. You can follow me on Twitter at Eric Tivers. You can like our Facebook page at facebook.com/ADHDrewired. If you're a coach, therapist, or related professional, connect with me on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/Eric Tivers. You can also subscribe to ADHD Rewired on YouTube. And you can subscribe to ADHD Rewired on YouTube and see select interviews and some other videos I've posted. Podcasts change lives. You can make a difference in someone's life by spreading the word about this podcast. Mention it in your online communities on Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, or wherever you hang out online. And be sure to share it with your friends and your family and your clients, as well as your coaches, therapists, and doctors. And if you're a coach, therapist, doctor, or ADHD support group leader, and you would like a pack of podcast postcards to hand out, you can request those at my website, ADHDrewired.com. And if you're a member of CHAD or any other ADHD support group, please be sure to tell them about this podcast. You can even show them how to download it on their phone. You know, you might be the person that turns somebody on to a podcast for the very first time. And if you really love this episode, please consider hitting share on your podcast player. I'm only one person, and I count on you to help me spread the message. One of the biggest things that you can do to support this podcast and to help other people discover it is to leave an honest rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or any other podcast app that accepts ratings and reviews. And don't forget to hit subscribe on this podcast on your podcast app so new episodes are automatically pushed to your favorite podcast app. Looking for more ways to listen and learn? Get a free audiobook and a 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/ADHD Rewired. Not sure where to start? In no particular order. Check out Atomic Habits by James Clear, The Body Keeps Score by Bessel van der Kolk, 10% Happier, and Meditation for Fidgety Skeptics. These are both by Dan Harris. Change Your Questions and Change Your Life by Marilee G. Adams. The One Thing by Gary Keller and Jay Papasan. Procrastinate on Purpose by Rory Vaden. The 4 Tendencies by Gretchen Rubin. Do you have trouble asking for help? Listen to The Art of Asking by Amanda Palmer. It's one of the best produced audiobooks I've ever heard. If you're looking for something a little bit more, say, magical, I unexpectedly fell in love with the Harry Potter series. And I don't usually listen to those kinds of books, and I loved it. And of course, if you haven't yet boarded the Brenan Brown bus yet, check out Brenan Brown's books, starting with The Gifts of Imperfection, Daring Greatly, Rising Strong, The Power of Vulnerability, and if you're an entrepreneur or leader in any capacity, check out her 2018 book, Dare to Lead. And Brenan still is my most wanted guest, so if you know Brenan, and you would be so kind to make that connection for me, I would be really, really grateful. You know who else I would like to have on the show? You. Click the podcast tab at ADHDrewired.com and then click the Be a Guest button at the top of that page and schedule a 15-minute pre-interview. This is Eric Tivers, reminding you to keep learning, keep growing, and keep connecting. Self-care is not selfish, and no matter what gets done or doesn't get done, at the end of the day, you are still enough. And no matter how hard it feels, we can do hard things. Thanks for listening. I'll catch you next week.